This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Welcome back to our show. Today I'm very, very happy to have a very special man with us. His name is Dr. Gianni Pirelli. Welcome to our show.
Very nice to be here.
Dr. Gianni Pirelli has established a program in the parish of Good Counsel, St. Thomas More, to support the caregivers of those suffering from the symptoms of dementia and to deliver a variety of activities to seniors to help them navigate to maintain their cognitive abilities. Welcome to Speak Up, Dr. Pirelli.
Thank you again for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor.
I have read your wonderful booklet, Alzheimer's in the Family, Preventing and Coping. It's concise, it's chock full of documented helpful ideas for coping, de-stressing, and maintaining abilities that is apt for anyone we call a senior. I had a friend who was suffering from dementia. She would not take her medication. Her response was to such a suggestion was to throw things at the caretaker and to try to attack her. She also accused others of stealing her things, which she had secreted in various hideaways, like under her mattress. There are things that happen that alert friends or family members to the fact that the patient is starting to show signs of dementia.
Yeah.
Would you please slowly list some of the main symptoms that someone needs help?
Yeah, I would start saying that basically I meet a lot of older adults who are worried about forgetting things. And we have to be clear about that. Forgetting something is not really a sign of dementia. You don't have to worry about it. First of all, because it can happen even when you are stressed and you are much younger than 65, which is the average of 90% of people who show dementia symptoms. But let me say that forgetting is often associated to a beginning of some dementia symptoms, and that we have to say, don't worry about that, because forgetting is part of normal aging. Just a few data. If we look at the population over 65, we have 10% who show dementia symptoms, and we will see what they are. The 40%, that's very intriguing data, the 40% show deficit in cognitive and memory performances, which means that it's just a deficit, it's not symptoms. And the 50% are perfectly sharp. It means like that some people can still run, some people have deficit to walk, and 10 have some diseases related to walk. We cannot walk when we turn 70 or run as we did in the past. And that's the same thing about forgetting and dementia. So I would consider to look at the frequency of how many times we forget. If it's once in a while, don't worry about it. Other dementia symptoms are for sure related to the activities at the day life you usually face. So you can start to have problems to make mathematical calculations, so change, or you can have some problems to process abstract thoughts, no more intellectual, so because part of the brain is affected. You can have change in feelings. So there are many little things, but again, these little changes don't have to lead us to think that we have a disease.
Because of the short story I told you, I would like you to start with communication concerning some common events.
Yeah.
How to communicate.
How to communicate. That's another interesting story because...
For instance, about names, remembering names.
Remember names, yeah. An example. Your loved one is going to meet her sister. And probably he could not remember the name of her children. So it's good, for instance, that the caretaker or the family caregiver, the wife, for instance, reminds him before to meet that person, oh, your sister is coming to visit us. Her name is Frank, and her children are, and reminding the names. This is not really part of the communication, but it helps to trigger a communication with more dignity, because it would be embarrassing with the sister, for instance, to forget, and the relatives get disappointed that the brother doesn't remember anything about the family. So this is the first thing. Something else could be, so we have to know that 90% of arguments between a family caregiver and a patient come from miscommunication. That's the main source of arguments. Other little, for instance, we thought about to tell the caretakers and the family caregivers to remind the day before of a birthday the fact, for instance, that the spouse is going to celebrate her birthday, because this is part of quality life. And again, we have to consider that the cognitive and the mnemonic deficits lead this person to have a misrepresentation of the reality. So you have to deal with someone else who sees the world in a different world you look at. And this is not easy when this is the person you loved for years. It could be your dad, your mom, the man you got married. So it's easy to say, it's not easy to do. That's why we try to support the family caregiver with these tips.
How about the pace of a conversation?
When we have to talk with someone who unfortunately have dementia symptoms, so he's slower in processing information, is lower, is slow to retrieve memories. We have to think that, like if we are talking to someone who doesn't know very well that language. Okay, so when I was in Italy and I had to speak to in Italian to a person who doesn't know very well Italian, because he visited me, or I tend to slow down the pace of conversation, because I have to give the time to process all my info. Why we have to, more scientifically and technically, why we have to slow down the pace of conversation? Because when the info travels among neurons, some neurons and synapses are like bridge destroyed. So to retrieve some information, the meaning of some words, of some events happen, it takes more time because some bridges are destroyed. So even if we are talking about seconds, it's not, but people with this deficit need more time to process the info. That's the only way to communicate. Otherwise, they could pretend to understand and answer something not strongly related, which is not very, there is not a lot of dignity in those events. They could have frustration, they can develop frustration inside, or even aggression. So communication, even if it's more simple than in the past, has to be effective. We don't have to have this paradox conversation, because it leads to not communicate anymore between the family caregivers and the patient, which is part of the social isolation within the apartment, not outside. So this is very important. Slow down the pace of conversation, and you don't have to convey too much information.
Why should we not be vague when referring to someone or something?
Let's do an example.
Yes.
Okay, we are going out we leave our house and we have to take the car. The wife's car, and the patient, he doesn't remember exactly what's the car of his wife. And if he doesn't remember what's the wife's car, it's not a good start to go out and to have some, good time outside. Because his failure, his deficits will remind both of them that they are not anymore the couple they used to be. So it could be, because he doesn't remember what is the car, you could help to give a few little information. For instance, we are going to take our car is parked over there on the left side. It's the brown car and it's parked in that direction. This is a simple way to avoid frustration and humiliation for the patient. Other things I experienced that family caregivers told me, when, for instance, your loved one starts to walk slower, because you love that person and you cannot stand it, you say, why are you walking so slow? Of course, this person cannot make it. He cannot walk better and faster. So it's important to be very careful to not emphasize anything new related to the disease. And I would say also that we have a couple of possible patients. There are some patients where the part of the brain able to understand that something is wrong in their life is not working. And they don't feel ashamed, they don't feel sorry, because they don't realize that there is something wrong in their life. For other patients, the part of the brain able to realize that, to process that their habits, their deficits are there, in this case, it's very frustrating for them who are able to understand their deficit to listen, to hear something like, oh, why you are not walking faster? Because it reminds them that they are sick. And so communication is very important.
And they can't do anything about it. Frustration.
Absolutely. This is one of the two sides. Frustration is more passive. The other side could be the aggression. So you can process the same feelings. You process your deficit. You become more aware of your deficit, and the feedback could be inner you, and it's frustration, and it can affect on your mood, your personality, or could be even aggression. That's why sometimes they are aggressive with caretakers, with family, because they. So I think that's very important to talk about communication.
Why should we emphasize the positive, not the negative?
Some of these.
What we felt as criticism or blame.
Yeah, this could be an universal tip, Sandra.
That's right.
That should be like the gospel for any kind of communication, Criticize in some way emphasizes your deficits, your failure. And when these deficits come from a disease, of course you are reminding this person that you are sick. And again, in those persons who the part of the brain able to realize they are sick, it hurts them a lot. It doesn't help, and it should be in any kind of conversation and communication, like the art of being wrong. No.
Yes.
We are talking about one of the communication tips in this booklet, where I say that we should develop the art of being wrong, which is a paradox, but it's very therapeutic in any kind of relationship.
Talk about how we can do that, please.
First of all, I would say that if couples comply with this rule, we won't have a lot of divorces, because it's something that help any kind of relationship. You have to get into the world of the person. You have to understand that this person, I mean, let's do an example. This booklet is blue, and you tell me that it's red. It's blue, of course, but I have to develop the art of it wrong and say, yes, I understand that that's red. I'm wrong, that's red. It's not red. But it helps to avoid any kind of arguments. You have to comply with the representation of the word of this person, regardless if it's right or wrong. You have to start from idea, if you want to help someone with deficit, that he's always right. And you have to comply with his vision of the world, of everything, anytime, except when it's about safety. That's the only exception I accept, and I tell my family caregivers. You have to comply with any kind of visions and interpretation.
Such as safety, for example.
For example, we are taking a walk. We go out for a walk, and you say that you want to cross the street because it's not risky and we can make it, but it's clear it's very risky and you cannot comply. So you have to say, no, I'm sorry, we have to stay. You can argue, yes, but it's worth arguing because it's about safety. Or there is, unfortunately can happen, you say, oh, I didn't take the medication, I have to take the medication. No, you already took it. Or you want to drink, it happened, a soap, liquid soap, because you thought was orange juice. Yeah. So when it's about safety, or you say that you want to do something with the kitchen stoves, and you can make it, but you cannot. So that are the situation where you cannot afford to develop the art of being wrong. But this is very important. It's very difficult for family caregiver to accept the idea that that person is not anymore the one you loved, the one you had a nice intellectual conversation, whatever. No. You have to understand that if you want to love this person, avoid arguments, you have also understand that you have to develop this art, which means that you're right, I'm wrong, period.
Essentially saying to yourself, this is not that important in the relationship, but this other thing is crucial, the safety thing.
One of the three things I work on with family caregivers and patients, one of the three is safety. So when communication can affect on safety, of course it has to reconsider. But when we talk about safety, we are talking about very clear safety indicators that you can monitor at your house. And first of all, there are 6, but 3 are the most scaring in my opinion. And first of all is wandering and getting lost. This is really a nightmare when it happens for usually the children of the spouse, because we know that, especially in New York, the 50% of people who are not found in the first 24 hours will never be found. So it's very risky. Second, falls. We know, for instance, that the 50% of people over 80 who have a hip fracture has unfortunately 6 months life expectancy.
Oh, wow.
So we are talking about something important. And falls are not only when you are walking, it's related to some, for instance, symptoms like the first episode of incontinence, okay? It happened many times that during the night, of course, you still have some dignity, you want to preserve your dignity with your spouse, for instance. So you rush to the bathroom, but because you don't have anymore the balance of a 4 years old person, you can easily fall. A lot of falls when people had hips fracture happen in the bathroom. The third thing is it's not really swallowing is the problem, but the two things can be choking and much worse. I'm very worried about that. The fact that you could, you can have some fragments of food, of liquid into your lungs, which can develop pneumonia ab ingestis. A lot of people with dementia die because of a pneumonia ab ingestis, which is an infection developed by fragments of food. And so these are the three things that I try to monitor with the dementia diary. The other three are, of course, burns and fires. Poisoning. Poisoning can come from taking many times the same medications because you forget it. Because your relative thinks that everything is fine at your home and you don't need anybody at home, no caretakers, you don't need relatives, and the person starts to take medication for another reasons and forgot to take the medication. He thinks he forgot, but he didn't. So he could be poisoned, because he took many of these medications, or even happen that you think it's an orange juice, but it's not. It's a chemical substance. So these are all things that we have absolutely consider priority when we take care of someone at home. Even if you are a caretaker, if you are a family caregiver, or if you just have some friends in this situation. So safety is very, very important.
How does one set safety up if it's possible?
That's very intriguing question, because it's more about healthcare system, no? When we talk about safety, if you look at the definition of safety of the most important institutions or federal agency, they talk about that safety should be provided by those who provide cares for this person. But we have a gray zone in this world. Mm-hmm. I say that it's the land of no one, because most of the families don't have a home care agency.
Yes, I'm glad you can turn your back 1 second and something happens.
Exactly. The responsibility of safety should be on the shoulders of those who provide cares, but we don't have, and real organizations, because it's self-made by, the family caregivers have to organize and become organizer of something that they never knew. So this is, and most of the hips fractures or all these accidents happen, really they happen when no healthcare organization is in charge of the care. So you cannot control, monitor, reduce, nothing. But they have some costs, of course, because when you go to the ER, when you are admitted to a hospital, there is a financial impact for the insurance, for health insurances. But they don't control this land of no one, the gray zone, because these home cares are really organized by the family caregivers. That's very interesting part of the conversation.
What does it mean to get into the patient's world?
You have to be coming back to the communication. Yeah, this means that sometimes your loved ones can start to say some paradoxal stories that he never said, only because he has some deficits. And it's clear that you cannot follow him in a rational way. But what's the alternative? You have, for instance, a patient, a lady, said to the husband, "Oh, look there, out of the window, in the other building, there is my mom. The mom was dead." So you have to get into her world, means that you don't have persuade her that her mom is dead. Why you have to convince her? What's the difference? Eventually you can just argue. You could try the first time, but usually it doesn't work. You just have to get into her world and say, oh yes, even if you don't look, you don't see her mom. Oh yes, she is very beautiful as usual. Do you like to see her over there? It's a paradox and a paradoxical conversation, but it's the only way to get over.
Gianni, would you please tell the audience what you think they should take away with them?
Yeah, I have two messages. Caretakers and caregivers, family caregivers are very exhausted, are usually so exhausted that they don't have energies anymore, any energy to ask for help. Don't do that, please. Ask for help even when you are there is a lack of energy before you get depressed, because when you turn into the vicious cycle of depression, it turns to be impossible to ask for help. Before that step, please ask for help. You have to, if you are listening to this message. Caretakers. Caretakers. We have good caretakers and bad caretakers. Honestly, that's worldwide picture. Okay. So to the good caretakers, I would say don't stay focused on the activities, but stay focused on the person. Okay? Be humble, and even if you took care of a person with dementia, don't take it for granted that you know everything about a patient like that, because the etiology, the prognosis, the phenomenology of the disease is different for every patient, so you cannot overimpose any case on the other. So be humble and try to realize that you still don't know a lot of things.
Thank you very, very much, Gianni.
I appreciated your invitation.
Until the next time, this is Sandra Schulte. Goodbye.